A double check is the advanced tactic from a discovered attack. You know what a discovered attack means already, I believe. It's when a piece is in the way and you move it out of the way. For example, here this knight is in the way. So we can move the knight out of the way and it'll be a check. You can play knight b5 and win the queen. But we're already down a queen. So that wouldn't win here. So a double check is a stronger version of a discovered check. So a double check is when you give check with both the pieces. The piece that it that is in the back and the piece that is blocking the way. So here can we move the knight and give a check with the knight and automatically it will be checking bishop as well. So where should we move the knight? We have two squares to move the knight. Remember, we are down a queen. So we have to find a good move here that will lead to checkmate. Can you spot the checkmate? It's in two moves. It is knight to f5 check. It's a double check. So when a double check happens, the king has to move. There is no other option. In a normal check, they can block. He can move the king. He or she can take our piece. But when we give a double check, he cannot capture a knight because bishop is giving a check. He cannot block with the pawn because knight's giving a check. So he has to move the king. That's the only response to a double check. That's why double check is a very strong weapon. And now after knight f5, the king has only one square, king g8. And now can you find the next move? Knight h6, checkmate. That's it. So but if you are thought of knight e6, it does not lead us anywhere after king g8. There's nothing to do after that. We just take a rook and that's not enough. But knight f5, king moves and knight h6 is checkmate. So with that nasty double check, we checkmated him in the next move. Let's look at another position. As you can see, there is a pawn in our way. So the move has to be with the pawn. Pawn takes pawn is our first move. But then what's our next move? You have to try to calculate. Pause the video and try to calculate. Pawn takes pawn. If king goes here, then it's checkmate in one move. It's a rook and queen checkmate. If king goes here, then it is what is the next move? We have rook g8 check, king takes, and then we have rook g7 check. King has to move back, and then queen e7 checkmate. So that's it. So pawn takes pawn, rook g8, and don't play queen g7, then the king escapes. We won't have anything after that. Rook g7, and now queen e7 checkmate. So we caught him there into a checkmate. He has just captured our queen. How are we going to react? Can we find a good way to checkmate him? Yes, the bishop. The bishop is blocked by the knight. We move the knight to where do we move? That's an important thing because if we move the knight to e7, king will move here, and then we don't have anything after that. So we have to play knight f6. King has to go to h8. It's a double check. He cannot take. He has to move the king to h8, and now it is a one move checkmate. So that's it. Knight f6 and bishop g7 checkmate. All right, let's look at another position. The knight should move, right? This is immediately what catches our eye. Knight has to move. Now knight g8 is there, knight d5 is there. There are two moves to consider. After knight g8, king will go to d7. And then we have queen e7, but the king will escape to c8. So we have to play knight d5. And if the king moves to e8, then it's directly checkmate. If the king moves to d7, then it's check and then checkmate on c7. And if the king moves to f8, that is the hardest line to calculate. We can just take the rook with check, and after king moves, then again check. And then what do we do? King will kind of escape there, right? So let's calculate again. Knight d5, king f8. Can we play queen e7? Does that help in any way? Queen e7, king goes to g8, we take, okay, it doesn't help. Queen takes, king g7, knight d5, king f8, queen takes, king g7, and then queen check, the king will escape. Then we can just pick up the rook, right? So what if the king goes down there? Then knight e7 and we still pick up the rook. So that's it. So knight d5, he goes there, we take the rook. And now when the king moves, we give a check again. If he comes up, we take his rook. We are up by full rook, basically. And if the king goes to g8, we play knight e7, and then we take the rook. Or we just take the pawn, and then, okay, he can't take that, and we take the rook. So that way, we will be up by a rook again. So that was the correct move there. Let's look at another position. Feels like a smothered mate. King is almost smothered there. How can we do this? This is a bit tricky. So knight check, king has to move to h2, and then queen check, he has to go back, because if he blocks, he can block also, right? It's a bit tricky then. Knight check, king moves, queen check. He has to block. He has to block. He cannot go back. He blocks. When he blocks, what could we do? We can't go back there, right? Let me see. So knight check, king moves. Bishop. So knight check, king moves, and then bishop check. And when he blocks, we have a discovered attack with the knight. A double check. Knight check again. King has to move. It's a double check, and then checkmate. So that's it. Knight f2, bishop f2, and now knight g4. It's a double check, and now queen h2. If this was not a double check, the king would have he would have been able to block. But knight g4 is a double check, and that is why he has to move the king. And now it is checkmate. So this is how we can use double check in our games to get into good positions.